The Bride in White, and the Shock at Dustwood Station. Summer of 1886, Dustwood Station. Nothing but red dust and the hard edge of the West. That afternoon, a sight stopped the whole town cold. On a splintered bench, under the blistering sun, sat a woman in a white wedding dress. No groom at her side. No laughter. No music. Just silence, curious stares, and mean-spirited whispers. Her name was Eleanor Hayes, 39, a widow who had buried her past in the East and traveled 1,800 miles chasing a promise of home. But here, at this station, her future husband's family abandoned her, too old, they said, to bear children. Under the burning western sky, she became a spectacle of shame. Yet fate works in its own ways. For in the very place she was broken, another door would open, with a name the whole town knew. Samuel Archer. June 1886. The noon sun scorched Dustwood until the boards of the station cracked beneath the heat. Air shimmered above the rails like warped glass. On a long bench sat Eleanor Hayes, rigid as a statue, wrapped in white silk meant for a wedding that would never be. Her lace bonnet sagged under the sun, dark hair clinging damp against her cheeks. She sat upright, eyes locked on nothing, while townsfolk drifted past, sneaking looks and whispering. Everyone knew. A telegram had come. Short, cold, final. Engagement canceled. Reason, age, apologies. Eleanor had crossed nearly 2,000 miles from the East, carrying hope in every stitch of her dress, every folded quilt, every iron pot in her trunk. And all it bought her was a scrap of paper now crumpled in her hand, ink blurred with sweat. She didn't cry. Her dry eyes spoke louder than tears. Shame carved deeper than grief. Children pointed and giggled. A bride without a groom. Wives glanced with pity, or with scorn, as if her fate was a warning. Eleanor's gloved hands clenched. Pride and pain held her in place. Somehow, she could not rise. The train whistle moaned, long and mournful, carrying others westward, while her journey ended in ruin. She sat in silence, a figure left behind. Then the door creaked open. Dust swirled, and a tall man stepped through, broad-shouldered, shadow stretching long across the boards. Samuel Archer, rancher on the edge of town, wealthy, widowed, known for a heart turned to stone since fever took his wife 3 years past. Folks said no one had seen him smile since. He had come for supplies, nothing more. But what he saw rooted him in place. A woman in white, stiff with invisible wounds. Something in her mirrored the day he lost everything. Not a fallen bride, but a soul fighting to stand tall when the world spat her down. He walked closer. His voice, rough from disuse, broke the hush. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Eleanor lifted her head, steady though trembling. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Only, my groom never came." Samuel gripped his hat, silence thick around him. He knew that emptiness, knew it too well. And before he could stop himself, words tumbled out that shocked even him. "Mrs. Hayes, if he won't have you, then let me. Marry me." Gasps rippled across the platform. Whispers rose like prairie wind. All eyes burned on Eleanor, the failed bride, now center of a proposal bolder than any preacher's sermon. Samuel stood tall, mountain still, hand outstretched. No ring, no kneel, just the raw promise of a man of the West. His eyes, once cold, now carried a fire. Not pity, but challenge. Will you stand with me against the world? The crowd hissed. A barren widow, mistress of McAllister Ranch? Others murmured softer. Maybe they both know loss. Maybe they need each other. Eleanor's heart thundered. She thought of empty rooms, the child she buried, nights with only wind for company. And now, before her, a man as broken as she, daring to promise a roof, a fight, a future. She placed her hand in his. The platform erupted. Jeers, gasps, silence. Samuel's grip tightened. His voice rang out. From this day, neither of us will stand alone. Tears blurred Eleanor's sight, but this time from something new, hope. Then a shout split the air. Archer, don't you dare shame your wife's memory. All turned. A bearded man in a dust-worn coat, Samuel's brother-in-law, stepped forward, fury blazing. You drag the McAllister name through the mud to wet a cast-off? Have you no honor? The platform boiled, half mocking, half silent, guns twitching at hips. Eleanor trembled. Samuel did not release her hand. He turned, eyes hard as steel. Honor isn't in their words. It's in how a man protects his home. And from today, my home has Eleanor in it. The crowd roared, lines drawn, jeers, cheers, hands on iron. Trouble could spark in a heartbeat. Eleanor's knees shook, but Samuel's back was a wall before her, unyielding. In that instant she knew, taking his hand wasn't just choosing a man, it was choosing a war. Against scorn, against kin, against a whole town if need be. And there on the dust-choked boards of Silver Creek Station, a fragile but burning alliance was born. It might mean salvation. It might mean ruin. If it were you standing there, whose side would you take? A. Eleanor Hayes. E. Samuel Archer, or would you choose another? Tell me in the comments. I want to know you're still riding with this story. In a small town, rumor runs faster than wind. Barely an hour after the shocking proposal at Dustwood Station, the whole place buzzed like a hornet's nest. From the blacksmith's forge to the saloon, from the dressmaker's shop to the apothecary, every corner carried the same whisper. The abandoned widow is marrying the richest rancher in town. On Main Street, folks gathered in tight circles, voices sharp and eager. Some sneered that Eleanor was nothing but a desperate woman clinging to wealth. Others spat that Samuel must have gone mad to marry a woman nearly 40, widow no less. Yet mixed in with the jeers were eyes glittering with curiosity, like they were about to watch a rare play unfold. Eleanor walked beside Samuel, her head bowed, the edge of her veil trembling in the breeze. Every step weighed heavy, for she felt 100 eyes on her back. But Samuel's steady hand pressed against her spine, a silent promise that he would not waver. They came to the red brick town hall at the street's end, its faded wooden sign still reading Dustwood Town Hall. Children playing on the steps froze as the couple approached. The door creaked open, revealing the solemn office where Walter Briggs, the gray-haired clerk, sat hunched over his papers. The sound of boots striking wood made him glance up. His brows shot down when he saw Samuel Archer, rarely one to visit town hall, holding the hand of a woman in a wrinkled wedding dress. "Mr. Archer, what's this about?" Walter asked, part baffled, part wary. Samuel's reply came short and solid. "We're here for a marriage license. Today." The words cracked like thunder in the quiet room. Walter's gaze shifted to Eleanor, pity mixing with doubt. But the iron in Samuel's eyes left him no room to argue. With a sigh, he pulled out the forms. Outside, a crowd swelled against the doors, straining to catch every sound. They wanted proof that the richest rancher in Dustwood truly meant to do this reckless thing. Eleanor's hand shook as she signed, ink blurring slightly on the page. Samuel's grip steadied her, keeping her upright under the weight of so many stares. For the first time that day, she felt not pity, but protection. And maybe that was enough to keep her walking forward. The church bell of Dustwood tolled hard and fast, carrying the news across the valley. By late afternoon, the little wooden church at the end of Main was jammed with townsfolk. Some came hungry for scandal, some for mockery, some for the kind of spectacle a town never forgets. Inside, light slanted through stained glass windows, painting color across Eleanor's face. Her dress was creased, dirtied from the road, but still she stood out, walking the aisle beside Samuel Archer, tall, unflinching, his gaze steady while whispers hissed all around. When the old minister's voice trembled through the vows, silence fell. Not reverence, but the tight silence of a crowd waiting for a man to falter. Would Samuel change his mind at the altar? At the exchange of rings, he hesitated. He had none. Then Martha, another widow, rose from her seat, slipped a worn silver band from her finger, and pressed it into Eleanor's hand. A man in the back row dug out a dull brass ring and gave it to Samuel. Not fancy, they said, but a wedding's a wedding. In that humble moment, even the loudest gossips hushed for a heartbeat. Samuel took Eleanor's hand. His voice rolled deep and certain. With this ring, I choose you. From this day, for all my days. Eleanor's reply wavered, but her eyes gleamed with a light she had not known in years. Amidst dust and whispers, a covenant was made, hasty, awkward, but sacred all the same. Yet even as the townsfolk muttered about Dustwood's new bride, a cold whisper slid from the back pew. A woman, face shadowed beneath a wide brim, leaned close to her neighbor. I know her. I know Eleanor Hayes's real past, and when it comes out, she won't have a shred of honor left. The words weren't loud, but they sliced the air. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. Rumor needs only a spark, and the spark had just been struck. Samuel's grip on Eleanor's hand never loosened, but she shivered. She didn't know who that woman was, but she knew one thing. The past she had buried in the East might have followed her all the way to Dustwood. If it were you in that church, whose side would you take? Michelle, Eleanor Hayes, Samuel Archer, or someone else? Leave your choice in the comments. I want to know you're still riding with this story. The wagon carrying Eleanor and Samuel rolled out of town, wheels grinding over red dirt as the evening wind carried the scent of smoke and dry hay from the fields. Far ahead, Archer Ranch came into view, a wide, weathered log house surrounded by sagging fences and shuttered windows that hadn't welcomed anyone in years. At the threshold, Eleanor paused. The silence inside was heavy, broken only by the groan of the floorboards. Dust blanketed the tables, cobwebs clung to the rafters. In the kitchen, old pots stacked in a smoky heap, the stove buried under a layer of cold ash. The whole place breathed emptiness, frozen in time since the day Samuel's wife passed. Samuel stood there gripping his hat, his eyes brushing the corners of the house, but he spoke no word. It was as if he left Eleanor to decide for herself whether she had the strength to stay. She drew in a long breath. Somewhere inside her, the part that had once been a wife and a capable homemaker stirred awake. She set down her trunk, rolled up her sleeves, and began to work. Dust lifted with every sweep, windows creaked open, and afternoon sunlight spilled golden across the room. In the kitchen, she coaxed the stove back to life, pinewood smoke curling into the rafters. She gathered what little she found, a few shriveled potatoes, some hard salted pork, and dropped them into a pot. Soon the gentle bubbling of stew filled the house, carrying a humble but homely smell. Samuel watched in silence, a feeling stirring in him he could not name. 3 years had passed without warmth in that kitchen, 3 years of dry meals eaten out by the stables. Yet here, in only hours, a woman mocked by the town had breathed life into a house gone cold. Their first supper was plain, potato stew, dry bread, hot tea, but when Eleanor placed the bowl before him, Samuel felt as if he were sitting at a feast. Sunset poured through the window, gilding the room in warmth. Across the table sat Eleanor, tired, yes, but with eyes that no longer carried the hollow look of Dustwood Station. In that quiet, a fragile beginning took root. The next morning dawned pale through the fog, painting Archer Ranch with a softer hue. Eleanor stepped onto the porch, brushing her hair back after a restless night. She froze. Along the rotting fence, vines of morning glory had burst into bloom, spilling purple and blue against the gray wood. She bent to touch the petals, and behind her Samuel's rough voice stirred. "Mary planted those. My wife. I haven't stepped out here since she passed." He shifted, uneasy, as though those flowers were the last bridge to a sorrow he'd buried. Eleanor only smiled faintly, a strange resolve swelling in her chest. She knew she was walking into a life haunted by another's shadow, yet instead of shrinking, she felt the urge to tend what remained, to make it part of the present. All morning she worked through the house, dusting frames on the wall, folding frayed linens, sorting drawers stuffed with old papers. In one desk by the window, her fingers caught on an envelope, edges brittle with age, sealed by the red stamp of the Dustwood Bank. Her heart quickened. She pulled it free, unfolding the notice inside. The words were few, but they cut deep. A warning of unpaid debt, 3 months to settle, or the bank would seize Archer Ranch and sell it off. The paper slipped from her hand onto the scarred table. She stared around the room, this place she had just begun to make alive again, and felt the weight of a cruel truth. Everything could be lost. Samuel had never told her. Samuel's shadow stretched long across the wooden floor as he stood there, caught between confession and silence. Eleanor's fingers trembled on the edge of the notice, her eyes locked on him with a steadiness that unnerved more than any sheriff's stare. The room was quiet save for the faint creak of the windmill outside and the low whistle of wind sliding through the eaves. He finally stepped forward, the boards groaning beneath his boots. "I meant to tell you," Samuel said, voice rough as gravel. "Just not like this." Eleanor rose slowly, the paper still clutched in her hand. "The land's near gone, isn't it?" she asked. No anger in her tone, just a hollow knowing. Samuel's jaw tightened. 2 seasons of failed crops, 1 flood. The bank waits for no man's prayers. His shoulders hunched as if the weight of it all pressed him downward. The flicker of bitterness inside Eleanor grew sharper. She thought of the mornings she'd seen him ride off before dawn, thinking it was to mend fences or tend stock. All the while he'd been hiding this storm from her. Yet alongside the sting, there came a rush of pity, for a man too proud to bear his ruin until the walls closed in. "You should have trusted me," she whispered, eyes glistening. "I came here ready to share the dust and the hunger, not just the harvest." Her words hit harder than any bank decree. Samuel's hand gripped the chair back, knuckles white. "I feared you'd leave, Eleanor. After all you've lost before, I couldn't hand you more sorrow." The silence broke when the wind outside slammed the door against its frame. Both startled, as though the land itself had spoken. Eleanor steadied herself, breathing deep, the scent of dry earth filling her lungs. "Running from truth only makes it heavier. If this ranch falls, it falls on both our shoulders. Not yours alone." Samuel lifted his gaze, meeting hers, and for the first time in weeks, the steel in his eyes gave way. He saw not just a partner in toil, but a woman fierce enough to stare ruin in the face and not flinch. The bank's notice lay between them on the table like a gauntlet thrown. Eleanor placed her hand atop it, fingers brushing his. "We'll fight," she said, firm as the soil beneath their boots. "But you must let me stand beside you. No more secrets." His throat worked, words slow to come. Then, with a nod, Samuel answered, "Together then." Beyond the window, storm clouds gathered in the west, rolling like dark cavalry across the horizon. The trials of this land were far from over, but in that charged moment, with truth finally laid bare, they stood ready, not as strangers bound by paper, but as two souls braced against whatever the West would hurl their way. If you stood in this house, whose side would you take? O. Eleanor Hayes. B. Samuel Archer. Or would you choose another? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to know you're still riding with this story. That afternoon, the western sky turned in an instant. Dark clouds rolled in thick, swallowing the sun until Archer Ranch lay under a pale, uneasy light. Wind rose, kicking dust across the yard, rattling the porch beams. Samuel stepped out, frowning toward the horizon. He had seen many storms. This one would not be gentle. The first thunderclap split the air, and within minutes the rain came hard, cold, heavy, blinding. Lightning tore across the sky and slammed into the north fence line, blasting posts to splinters, leaving the stench of smoke in the downpour. The cattle bawled in panic, crashing through the broken pen and stampeding into the storm. Samuel grabbed the stallion's reins and shouted above the roar, "Eleanor, stay in the house! It's too dangerous!" But Eleanor did not retreat. Weeks ago, she had been a silent, abandoned bride on a station bench. Not now. Seeing the herd scattering wild, she clenched her jaw, threw on a cloak, and mounted the young mare she'd only begun to train. "I won't leave you!" she cried through the gale, eyes blazing. Samuel froze a moment, but it was too late to stop her. Young Tommy, the ranch hand, leapt onto his pony, pale but determined. Together, the three of them plunged into the storm's fury. Wind ripped at their faces, rain stung like lashes, mud slicked the ground. Beneath hooves, the cattle crashed and turned, horns thrashing, wild enough to kill. Samuel charged ahead, rope swinging to block the lead bull. Tommy flanked from behind, snapping his whip to drive the stragglers. Eleanor, hands trembling on the reins, fought to push the scattered herd back together. One bull barreled straight at her. Her heart slammed, but instead of fleeing, She yanked the reins hard, raised her arm, and shouted it down. The beast faltered, long enough for Samuel to loop his lariat and haul it back into the fold. For nearly an hour, they battled mud and thunder, bodies soaked, horses lathered, until at last the herd was corralled into a makeshift pen. Samuel heaved for breath, hair plastered to his brow. When he turned, Eleanor was trembling, face pale, but her eyes burned bright in the stormlight. In that moment, Samuel no longer saw a fragile woman to shelter. He saw courage, tested, proven. Eleanor Hayes had stood shoulder to shoulder with him, facing chaos head-on. The storm rolled away at last, leaving a sky heavy with gray clouds. The yard lay drowned in mud, fence posts blackened and broken. The cattle huddled close, steam rising from their backs in the cold air. Samuel and Tommy hauled timber, setting new posts. Eleanor, her dress caked with dirt, sleeves rolled, worked beside them. Blisters swelled on her palms, her small frame shook with cold, but she pressed on without pause. Samuel watched in silence, respect stirring in him like never before. The woman mocked, as a cast-off bride had proved she could share more than meals and firelight. She could share the fight itself. When the last post was driven, Samuel leaned against the fence, a sigh of relief escaping him. He looked at Eleanor, hair plastered to her cheeks, face drawn but eyes lit with unbroken resolve. She was no longer the abandoned bride. She was his partner. But just as the three thought the storm had passed, a figure emerged from the distance. A tall man in a wide-brimmed hat and a drenched black coat, leading a heaving horse. He had appeared in the storm, throwing a rope to help hold the herd. Samuel strode forward, extending a hand. "You lent us a strong hand out there. I owe you thanks." The stranger nodded, but his gaze didn't rest on Samuel. It locked on Eleanor. She stiffened, clutching her cloak, lips trembling as she whispered, "Dear God, Henry Whitlock?" The air froze. Samuel's eyes cut to his wife, noting the strange panic there. The man removed his hat, revealing sharp features, eyes cold as a Boston winter. A thin smile tugged at his mouth. "Well, Eleanor," he drawled with biting amusement, "I didn't expect to find you all the way out here in Dustwood." Samuel understood at once. This was no passing traveler. This man was tied to Eleanor's past, a past she had never spoken of. Wind howled through the broken fence. The storm of rain had passed, but a storm of secrets and suspicion was only beginning. If you were here, whose side would you take? A. Eleanor Hayes. B. Samuel Archer. Or would you choose another? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to know you're still riding with this story. One quiet afternoon, while Samuel was out checking the stables, Eleanor sat in the parlor, her hands busy mending a frayed shirt hem. The hush was broken by hoofbeats drumming closer, then halting at the gate. The town's young post-rider burst in breathless, handing her a plain envelope sealed with red wax. The slanted handwriting on the front made her heart falter. Margaret Hayes, Boston. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside lay a neatly penned letter and an old, faded photograph. It showed Eleanor's grandmother in a simple wedding dress beside a silver-haired man. On the back, faint words had nearly vanished with time. Day of happiness, 44 years old. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. That picture was proof that late love was no less true. Her grandmother had married at an age the world called too late, and still found joy. Eleanor, at 39, felt the same yearning for a new beginning. The memory softened her chest, giving her strength, but Margaret's words quickly dragged her back to the present. Eleanor, I am glad you've found shelter in the far west. Yet I fear the past hasn't let you go. In Boston, they still speak of the old matter. Do you remember? The Whitlocks claim you were greedy for inheritance after your husband died. They tell anyone who will listen that you schemed for land, that you are a cold woman who cared only for money. Each line cut deep. The letter slipped from her fingers as memories surged. Days of mourning after her husband's death, facing the Whitlocks' accusing glares, their venomous whispers that she'd been waiting to seize the estate. She had stayed silent, too broken to fight back. And in that silence, she had become guilty in the eyes of the world. Now, in her new home, she felt that ghost creeping behind her. Even if Samuel had chosen her, would he still trust her if he heard those lies? Eleanor clutched her grandmother's photo to her chest. Pain lingered, yet a spark of hope flickered. If her grandmother had outlived the scorn, so could she. But first, she would have to face the truth, Samuel's truth, and her own. The wind rattled the new fence outside, whispering like a warning. Secrets never stay buried. Samuel stepped into the parlor to find Eleanor hastily pressing the letter to her palm, the lamplight revealing fear on her face. He paused, then spoke low and steady. Eleanor, that letter, who's it from? Her resolve broke. She handed it to him. Samuel sat heavily in the wooden chair, eyes moving line by line, his brow deepening with every word. The room thickened with silence, broken only by the howl of wind at the shutters. When he finally looked up, Eleanor burst into tears, her strong face undone. Between sobs, she confessed, Samuel, they say I was greedy. They accused me of clinging to land that my husband and I bled for. I stole nothing. It was mine as much as his. But they twisted it, cast me out, and claimed it all. I stayed silent, thinking the truth would outlive the lies. But silence only made me guilty in their eyes. Her voice cracked, each word raw. Samuel rose, laying a rough, steady hand on her shoulder. His eyes carried no doubt, only sorrow. His voice was firm. I believe you, Eleanor. I know you're not that woman. A woman who rides into a storm to save cattle by my side. She's no schemer. But then came hoofbeats thundering outside the gate. Both startled. Samuel grabbed the rifle from the hearth and motioned Eleanor to stay back. He stepped onto the porch. Moonlight fell pale across a tall figure dismounting a steaming horse. The stranger who had appeared in the storm, the one who had thrown a rope to save their herd. He walked forward, brim low, voice rough. Eleanor Hayes, at last I've found you. Eleanor's face went white. She stepped outside, her voice shaking. Arthur Whitlock. Samuel stiffened. The very name he'd read in Margaret's letter. The Whitlocks, who had driven Eleanor from her home. Arthur's eyes narrowed, cold glinting under his hat. You thought you could ride west and leave it all behind? The land in Boston was Whitlock land. I've come to reclaim it. And if I must drag your name through the mud again, so be it. Samuel's hand tightened on the rifle, stepping in front of Eleanor. He knew this man wasn't here for land alone. He was the embodiment of the past Eleanor had feared, now standing on their porch. The air stretched taut as a drawn wire. Their fragile love, barely begun, was already being tested by an old wound and a new threat that could not be ignored. If you were standing here, whose side would you take? Antito. Eleanor, the woman fighting for her honor. B. Samuel, the man standing firm to protect his wife? Or another choice? Leave your answer in the comments. I want to know you're still riding with this story. That morning, Dustwood awoke under clear skies after days of storm. Sunlight washed the streets, the wind carrying the scent of wild grass and damp earth. Folks gathered in small knots around the square, eyes fixed on the couple walking with steady steps. Samuel moved with deliberate calm, tall frame radiating resolve. Beside him, Eleanor wore a simple beige dress. Her face was composed, but her eyes burned bright. In her hand she carried Margaret's letter, proof that the slanders haunting her name were nothing but cruel invention. When they stopped before the red brick town hall, the crowd hushed. Samuel's voice carried, deep and sure. My wife, Eleanor Hayes, is no greedy schemer, as they say. She was slandered, cast down by her late husband's kin. But in the storms we've weathered, she proved herself, brave, true, and unshaken. Eleanor stepped forward. Her voice quivered, but not with weakness. I've nothing left to hide. I was smeared. I was stripped of all I had, but I kept my honor. And now I choose to live not in shadows, but in the light of truth. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Folks remembered her riding into the storm to help save the cattle. Others recalled seeing her scrub the Archer house back to life. Doubt softened into respect. Even Walter Briggs, the clerk who'd mocked her most, rose to speak. She's borne enough slander. If any still question her, look at what she's done for this town. From that day, Eleanor set her hand to building a small school in a room beside the church. Old desks were mended. Sunlight streamed through bare windows onto books she'd brought from Boston. Children once left to wander now sat giggling as they traced their letters. Their laughter filled the room, turning it from emptiness into Dustwood's new heart. Neighbors came not only to leave their children, but to talk, to trade news of crops, to sip Eleanor's tea. A new sense of community took root, not in gossip, but in trust. At dusk, Samuel often stood on the porch, watching Eleanor among the children. He saw what she had done, not only saving the Archer ranch, but giving life back to the town itself. Eleanor Hayes, the woman once abandoned, had become a pillar. A year later, Dustwood Station glowed under summer sun. The same platform that once witnessed her shame now held a new beginning. People from miles around gathered, dressed in their finest, eager not to miss the day. The wedding of Samuel Archer and Eleanor Hayes, proper and true. Morning glory vines bloomed over the old station posts, purple and blue spilling wild. Once planted by Samuel's late wife, they now crowned the day Eleanor stepped forward as his bride. Samuel stood in a new suit, solid as stone. In his hand, 2 golden bands caught the sun, not borrowed trinkets, but rings engraved with a promise inside. From the storm we rise. The church bell rang, and the crowd fell silent. Reverend Cole's voice wavered, old but warm. Today we witness more than a wedding. We witness 2 wounded souls reborn. Samuel Archer, a man marked by loss, and Eleanor Hayes, a woman cast aside, have found one another. In this love they have found family. They have found faith. When Samuel slid the ring onto Eleanor's hand, applause thundered. Women dabbed at their eyes. Children whooped and tossed wildflowers from the fields. Eleanor looked up at Samuel, her eyes shimmering. She was no longer a forsaken traveler on a lonely bench. She was a wife, embraced by all. After the vows, tables lined the station yard, groaned with bread, roast meat, and apple cider. Laughter spilled into the air. Even those who once sneered came forward to bless the couple. Dustwood itself seemed transformed, redeemed by the truth laid bare in their story. Eleanor glanced toward the morning glory vines, her heart whispering, "At last, I have a true home." Samuel took her hand, his gaze steady with faith. And so, at the very place where her deepest wound was struck, a radiant beginning was etched. Their story was not merely one of late-blooming love, but a testament. From ashes, joy can rise, resilient as the morning glories that bloom beneath the western sun. The story of Eleanor and Samuel leaves us with much to ponder. A widow once abandoned, a man once broken. They found each other not in calm days, but in the storm. And from those storms, love took root, stronger than any promise spoken. Perhaps we too understand now happiness is never too late. No matter age, no matter past, if there is faith and courage, we can begin again. And you, if you were in Eleanor's place, would you have the strength to face the past and stand for truth? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss more heartfelt stories from the Wild West.